I still remember petroleum engineering and how interesting the oil and gas industry was to me at the time. So, learning about rocks, learning about geology, learning about how to extract oil and gas from the ground, learning about how it supports people and uplifts people's quality of life. That all interested me. And that's how I decided to pursue petroleum engineering.
Welcome. This is Jack of Old Trades podcast. I'm here with Yoshi, the trailblazer.
Thank you for having me.
We were just talking about, and I'm going to just continue our conversation. And I wanted to hear the story is self-development books that we both will read, but I didn't ask what was your favorite one and what made the most impact on your life. So I want to start out with there. What is the best self-development book that made the most impact on your life?
That's a really good question. I know for me, it wasn't until I was forced to read about self development that ended up being the book that was my favorite self development book. I was in a mentorship program in high school, and that's a fancy way of saying you get an internship your spring semester, and hopefully it turns into
Yeah.
a summer internship before you go to college. But with all of that being said, some of the pre work that we had was reading a book called The Seven Highly Effective Habits of Teens. So, Seven Highly Habits of Effective People by Stephen Covey. This is written by Sean Covey. When I read that book, the first tip I remember, and I still continue that tip to this day, is to be proactive.
Mm.
And being in this industry, after being in it for 10 years or so and going through the ups and downs, being proactive is something that I knew that was very beneficial for me. And that is the tip and that's one of those takeaways that I still continue to this day. I may not have remembered all the other tips, the other six tips, but the being proactive was the one that was the first tip. And it's probably the only tip that I still take away with me to this date.
That's the best tip. I feel like that's a huge one in my life. I know that whenever I get ahead of whatever you're doing, then it goes a lot smoother. It goes a lot smoother. So, uh, some things I want to talk about today is your story. You were born in India,
Correct.
correct? And you moved here. When did you move here?
I moved here when I was 6 months old.
6 months old.
June 1993.
93. Okay.
That seems like a generation ago.
Yeah, right.
It is a generation ago.
And you're from Texas?
I moved to New Jersey, actually.
New Jersey.
Yeah. And then when I was 4, that's when I moved to Texas.
4. Okay.
And the funniest story is that when my dad told my mom and I that we were going to move to Texas, one of the funniest things that I did was I had my pink cowboy boots and a pink hat, and I was just saying yeehaw throughout the house.
Yeah.
But with that being said, I've lived in Texas, grew up in Houston for most of my life,
Mhm.
and I went to the University of Texas to get my bachelor's in petroleum engineering. And we could talk a whole lot about how I got into engineering to begin with, too, if that's something that you want to get into. And then I started my career in oil and gas in Midland in 2015. And what's funny is that I knew that I wanted to work in Midland, but I got so much flack about working in Midland because people kept telling me how bad of a place it is. You're going to be bored. There's nothing to do. You're going to be a single woman and you're not going to have a life. However, Midland was the place to be, and I knew it because that's how many people told me that's how you start your career. And that's exactly what I did. When I started with my first job in 2015, I worked as a field production engineer. And as that time, I took every single advantage of different kinds of operations that were in the field, and I worked odd hours until they gave me the opportunity to be a worksite supervisor or like a consultant for workovers. So I did a lot of that and I really enjoyed that. It helped me earn a little bit of my stripes and rapport with people in the field. I know that's really important. And it also helped me appreciate a lot of the operations that we see today with so much development in unconventional resources. So then in 2016, that's when oil price took a nosedive. And in 2016, I got laid off from the company that I worked for, my first job. And I was not even a year in, but
Without that make were you like devastated? Where
I
I was
I was devastated. The the funny thing that I did is I ugly cried for 10 minutes, took a nap, and then I went on LinkedIn.
that's what you do, right?
Yeah.
You ugly cry it out, and then we gotta move on, pick it
Yeah.
up, and let's go.
But what I knew was there was writing on the wall before that happened. And I reached out to about 150 people that I knew and looking for different opportunities, asking for advice, how to revamp my resume. I was all over it until I got an email from one of my not high school, my university professor. And she gave me a business card. You need to call one, you need to call this guy. His name is Jeff Spath. And turns out he was an SP president in 2014. And I emailed him just introducing myself, talking about an opportunity that I'm looking for, like in production engineering. And then she sent a recommendation letter to him because I won a paper contest at the international level in the bachelor's division back in 2015 at the annual technical conference and exhibition.
I know I just had Mitchell Gibson on, and we talked about him winning competitions. So I'm on a roll here. We're gonna have to see what did you win? What's the competition? You know?
It was based on public speaking, and it
Oh,
was
was
giving a
it?
presentation. It was
Yeah.
writing a paper and giving a 20-minute presentation, speaking within time, talking about your technical work, and it was based off of the internship that I did right before I graduated from university.
Okay. Yeah. Cool.
So, she mentioned that because she was really invested in my growth and in coaching. Professors did that a lot when they would coach students to do well in these competitions and represent the university. So she wrote that recommendation letter. He was impressed, Jeff was impressed, and invited me for an interview. Another funny thing is that I didn't know that interview was for a full time offer. I was low key just looking for an internship opportunity. I was trying to get anything I can get. And when Jeff came to the university to give his talk to the students, he specifically talked about internship opportunities. It wasn't until the interview when I had with Jeff at the time that at the end, and he's going to listen to this and find it funny, but at the end of it, I asked him, "Hey, thank you so much for the opportunity to interview. I'm looking forward to the internship opportunity." He gives a look at me and says, "This is a full time opportunity you just interviewed for." And that was the first embarrassment that I had. But needless to say, in a week, I was extended an offer to work for Texas Oil and Gas Institute, which is a part of university lands. So there's a whole book about university lands, and we can talk about that if we get into it even more. But there's a lot of history behind university lands.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm from here. However, I don't think most people in the Permian know about university lands and the whole University of Texas thing. So that's super neat. So that's a great. How did you? Would you want? Why did you want to be an engineer?
Why I wanted to be an
Yeah,
engineer?
and then petroleum.
Right.
Yeah. So I mean, what brings it to oil and gas?
Well, my mother knew that I was good at math and science. I would gravitate towards toys that were related to math and science that worked the left side of the brain. And she just encouraged me to work on that skill, to be really good at math, like your multiplication, double digits, your decimals, and then compete in science competitions like Science Olympiad or the science fair at your school. And I continued to do that. But I didn't know what kind of engineer I wanted to be. I was also on the debate team in high school. And I was even debating on being a lawyer at the time. It wasn't until my mother encouraged me to go to an all girls engineering camp that was hosted by the University of Houston. It's called Grade Camp. And I'm a product of women in STEM initiatives, really, because at that camp, we learned all different types of engineering, including petroleum engineering. And that's when I first heard about the oil and gas industry when I was 14. Fast forward to my junior year, and I was applying to be a part of a mentorship program where select students of the school district get to write research papers on a career that they think they want to pursue at the time, and then seek internship opportunities their spring semester, like a shadowing, a mentorship, your spring semester, in the hopes that you get a summer internship opportunity before you go to university. So I was selected for that program, and I still remembered petroleum engineering and how interesting the oil and gas industry was to me at the time. So learning about rocks, learning about or so geology, learning about how to extract oil and gas from the ground, learning about how it supports people and uplifts people's quality of life. That all interested me. And that's how I decided to pursue petroleum engineering. So then, once I got into that program, I thought, I am going to seek out a mentor. And that's what we were required to do, seek out a spring internship mentor. And one of the research topics that I wrote, and I even posted this on LinkedIn, that I wrote a paper on CO2 flooding and carbon sequestration. And I don't know how I combined the two topics together, but when you go to a public library, I went to the U of H Anderson Library, and that's where I stumbled upon One Petro, the technical database of SPE papers. And I started doing a bunch of research as a 17, 18-year-old with no guidance or direction. And I just combined two separate topics together and wrote a 10-page research paper. And the mentor that ended up responding to me after cold calling many of them, he was the only one that responded to my email. His name is Claude Thorpe, and he works at a consulting firm. He was impressed, and he saw something in me. He really did. He invited me to speak with him and offered me a spring internship or mentorship opportunity at his consulting firm. So once a week, I would go and learn about the oil and gas industry as a senior in high school. And then that formulated into a summer internship where I even went to India for the summer internship because the consulting firm had an office in India and I was doing some work there, some consulting work there. So I was well prepared for my first semester at university, having that internship experience.
That's excellent. Here's the you won your competition in public speaking, and then someone thought that your oil and gas paper was excellent, and then I feel like that kind of moved you, huh? Do you feel like that kind of moved you in that direction? And that's great to hear because in my opinion, I've only had great experiences with coming up, with the leaders here in the oil and gas as I've grown up. And so that's great that you've had the same experiences that I have. And so I want to get into what's the technical thing that you really enjoy right now that you're doing,
What keeps me up at night?
Yeah, what keeps you up at night, right?
What keeps me up at night is how to keep production going because I am a production engineer, how to look at the right kind of lens when you're comparing yourself to peers, because you can look at all sorts of data and people can come with all sorts of conclusions, different kinds of conclusions. Depends on what kind of lens you put them on. So, what keeps me up at night is what is the right kind of lens to compare yourself to competitors, how to keep production going. I specifically focus on downtime, for example, as a production engineer, and how do you reduce that downtime in the field, or what are some systemic issues that need to be solved to reduce that downtime in the future. There's a target that we try to reach in terms of our production, so there's a target downtime that we ought to reach, and how do we reach that target. So that, as a production engineer, that keeps me up at night. Now if you asked me a couple years ago working as a reservoir engineer, what kept me up at night is, well, what's that optimal well spacing? What is that optimal drawdown strategy? How do you pull on your wells to get the most out of them in terms of value? The inventory, how to rank your inventory, and with the acreage position that you have, are you going through that inventory as optimally as possible and still convincing shareholders that you're still providing enough, or you're still providing value? So those are a lot of the things that keep me up at night.
Okay. And so I came from gas lift, so I have favorite. I have a biased. So downtime. What's your you're in production. What's your favorite method of producing? And don't say ESP. Okay.
I was going to say it depends on the basin.
Okay.
And that's the most diplomatic answer I can give you. And it depends on the bench. So I actually wrote a paper on determining an optimal artificial lift when I was in university lands. It was combining production and reservoir engineering, and it was looking at different kinds of formations. And for each formation, what is the right kind of strategy? What's the first artificial lift install you need to apply? What's the second artificial lift install you need to apply? I will say for the Southern Midland Basin in the paper, and with some of the operators that produced on university lands that provided us the data, there was gas lift. Gas lift was up there. And then in the Northern Midland Basin, there was ESP. And then in the Delaware Basin, it's pretty much dominated by gas lift. And you probably hear what the bee's knees are in terms of gas lift is that there's high pressure gas lift, there's for later life wells, there's intermittent gas lift, and then there's plunger assisted gas lift. So we can talk about gas lift a
Yeah.
lot if that's something that you're interested in.
Well, what's your favorite?
My
What's your favorite way? Or what's your if you're doing downtime, what do you think is the one that has the least amount of downtime?
In the paper that I wrote, yeah, gas lift has the least amount of downtime.
And I think that I'm gonna give myself credit, and that's because there was people like me keeping the gas lift going out there, and we did a great job. But no, that's great. So gas lift. So you thought gas lift had the best runtime.
At the time when the data that we were looking at in the paper, and I can more than happy send you those links, but yeah, gas lift had the narrowest range of downtime. And then that was also around the time operators were on a learning curve about how to best operate their ESPs. So you see a reduction in that downtime for those that are using ESPs as initial artificial lift installations. So I would say that you can't go wrong with either one, but it really does depend on the formation that you're producing from. What's that gas to liquid rate ratio? What is that water oil ratio? What is that what is that what is that gas volume fraction? Like, a lot of people talk about that in multi-phase flow meters, or multi-phase meters. So I can go on and on about that, but what I'm trying to say is it really does depend. And I like gas lift as it's pretty simple in some of our gassier formations, but in our oilier formations, and if you know how to run it right, you would take your chance with an ESP.
I know now that ESP has came a long way since I've produced, and so I think that started to become the favorite right now in the industry. I don't know if that's true or not. That's just what I hear. And what do you think? I mean, what's the play? Do you think that the industry as a whole has you were talking about Southern Basin. Do they have this sure pathway that everyone needs to take uh that every like as far as every producer needs to take to have the best result, or is it still up to debate? Like you talked about lens, or is that still up to debate? Like you think that there's still better ways that people can do it, uh, or is it all just there? We figured out the way.
That's a great question. I think people are still trying to figure things out what is best for their acreage position. So, in one of the companies that I worked for, I remembered a supervisor or an executive was talking about how certain operators would have certain acreage positions and would recommend the optimal well spacing, recommend which benches to produce from based on their acreage positioning. And it also does depend on how economic that strategy is. So every company has a different way of how to produce their oil and gas wells and strategize. What is that optimal well spacing? Which benches to produce from? What is the combination of benches to produce from if you're going to co develop or if you're going to develop formations one by one? It all depends on the operator's economic standing and their economic thresholds. And I also think it is still, when I wouldn't say up for debate, but I still think there is some figuring out to do in terms of going after your best, going after your best formations are your most valuable, or there are combinations of developing your best with your tier two. So it really does depend on what kind of portfolio that the company wants to develop to continue that value. And I think people are still trying to figure that out.
That's cool. That's super cool. And I hear you have a podcast, and so that's you talked about it's technical. Tell us about that. Tell us about what you do there.
Sure, in October 2021, so 5 months after starting the 7 months after starting the YouTube channel, I thought, why not add another thing to my plate? Let's start a podcast. And the impetus of that was I love reading technical papers. I love reading. I'm a bookworm, but think about SP papers. And I was told by one of my first mentors, so Jeff Spath in University Lands, that if you read a technical paper every single week, you're going to become an expert. And I wanted to be a technical expert. But I also thought these papers are really hard to get through. Some of them are so dense, like 20 pages. And not to mention, it can be 40 pages with an appendix and with so much more derivations or explanations. I have to admit, reading a paper sometimes puts me to sleep. And I guess I'm not afraid to admit that. But to make the information more digestible, I thought, let's start a podcast, kind of like a book club, where I read the paper. But I'd like to also like to give credit to the author who put in the paper, put in the thought, put in the work in discovering something that can push the industry forward. And I like to ask those questions to gain that clarity on how to make the paper more digestible, what's interesting about the paper, and what makes the paper unique to where it contributes to the industry. Thought it was a way to pay it forward, but also make nerdy things cool again.
Yeah, I think that's kind of where we're going off is that what sells the show, what sells like on YouTube and TikTok is the person doing the most outlandish thing. And as I get older now, maybe that was actually I can not maybe that was cool when I was younger, but I do feel like we should try to make nerdy stuff cool. It seems like that'll get us a lot further ahead in society than the most popular thing being the craziest thing that you can produce on a camera.
I agree with you. It's really interesting how social media, for example, especially, I mean, you and I are connected on LinkedIn,
Mhm.
but LinkedIn, for example, is it can be it can be controversial. Like some people can be controversial just to get a rise out of other people, to get the ratings, to get the comments, to get the engagement. And I sometimes wonder, what is the balanced view of a post, or what's the balanced view of a certain topic? And the way I have approached my LinkedIn to this date, yeah, getting feedback, getting the comments is great. The engagement is great, but I also think that having a balanced view is really important, and I think we need more of those. We need more of that kind of content in the industry.
Yeah, and I think that from what I've seen and how I try to go about it, and I know that you have, is that I've seen that you've gained a following, and you have a balanced view. You try to say interesting things, but not like, you know, not that you're trying to that not that it would make a lot of people super upset that you're saying them, or to that clickbait type. And I think so. I think it's working. I will say, as I think it's working. I don't know. How do you feel about that?
It's definitely been a learning process, and when I say a learning process, I observe what other people post and I see how people engage, and you 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 get a perception of that, or you get a feel of how people react to certain posts. Obviously, you need to have a filter. I mean, you can't just post anything on LinkedIn, but there is a way to have a balanced view but still be authentic about it. I think as long as you respect other people on the platform and you are doing this with positive intent, I think a lot of people can see that and that authenticity can come through.
Yeah, the authenticity. As long as you're authentic, it draws people, and that's big in today. And I think that would be a message I try to tell everyone, is to just be yourself, and just be yourself. And so, what kind of impact do you want to make in the industry? What's the goals?
Wow. I have a lot of them.
Yeah. Okay.
When I say a lot of them, I made a post just a couple days ago on everything that I wanted to achieve in
Oh,
2025. No, I'm reflecting on that, but the kind of impact that I want to make in the industry is empower people to talk about the industry and to stand up for their industry that they work in. There's a lot of times that oil and gas gets a bad rap, and there's a lot of unbalanced views from the media about the dangers of fossil fuels, how we shouldn't invest in fossil fuels, or how universities should divest from fossil fuels. When in reality, you need to include us in the table. You need to invite us to the table, be a part of the conversation, and it's going to take people that work in fossil fuels to come up with a sustainable solution, to come up with those technical ideas, to come up with the education in oil and gas. So the impact I want to make is empower people to stand up for their industry and educate people that are outside the industry that oil and gas is pretty cool.
yeah. So you're telling me that we're not all evil earth killers here.
Absolutely
Okay. Okay, good.
not.
I, I got worried there for a minute. Okay. That's awesome. Anything, what else, you want to empower the industry? That's the impact you want to make.
hmm
Anything else? What else? What was your other goals?
Well, there were a lot of them were self-development goals.
Self-development.
Yeah. So you hear a lot about Warren Buffett reading 400 pages a day or CEOs reading a book a week. And the reason why people do that, or these executives do that, is to learn new information, learn different perspectives, and see how they can apply something new into their businesses. And while I have a small business such as the YouTube channel that I'm growing, I think that I think that reading a book a month is something that I want to start with and see how that goes, because there's a lot of things that I want to do, but increase that frequency to probably a book a week just to see how much I can retain that information and then apply immediately. Because I think it's the application of the information that's really important.
What book do you have your eye on? What's the next one?
Right now, I'm reading Fossil Future by Alex Epstein.
Oh, yeah.
hmm So Alex Epstein is He isn't even from oil and gas. Like, he grew up in Chevy Chase, Maryland, and discovered oil and like, discovered the fossil fuel industry and has a positive view on it, and he's an advocate of it. How can someone that doesn't work in the oil and gas industry come to that positive conclusion when there's many of us that are not even willing to speak up about it, that work in the industry?
Yeah, I agree. I actually find it odd that people villainize it so much, or the people that do villainize it. I don't understand how they come to those conclusions. Uh just because I don't judge anyone for what they do in their lives, or if they want to go a different direction, it's like that's okay too. Like anything that people do is okay, and I don't think that either way is destroying the world. And so that's yeah, I do find it odd that the villanation. But I haven't read that book. I've heard it's really good, but I have not read it. And yeah, I do feel like people come to that conclusion if you were to see our industry. Yeah.
Absolutely. So he also has another book called the first book that he wrote is called The Moral Case of Fossil Fuels. And then this is his second book, The Fossil Future.
And so what else do you have? Any other goals?
Any other goals that I have? So I talked about the uh I talked about the reading a book a month. I talked about what impact that I want to make in the world. I definitely want to grow the YouTube channel. So it's been a one woman show for 4 years. And I started the YouTube channel, some might say out of spite, but I would say it was something that I wanted to do for quite some time. But it wasn't until I got a comment from a feedback that someone noticed that I'm really good at branding myself. And it didn't start that way, or that wasn't the intention. But I got a comment that I'm the queen of self promotion. And I thought, well, if I am so good at that, why don't I just just own it and play on with it? So that's how I started the YouTube channel. And the first video that I posted was my husband and I getting married at a pump jack at one of the company's or one of the locations that I was working for the company. So, so monetize the YouTube channel is definitely a goal of mine. And I hired a team to help increase my digital presence in social media. So that's something that I want to do. I am I funny enough, I learned all 5 levels of Spanish in high school, but I never continued it in university, and I remember more Spanish than than people that have taken Spanish in high school. So, and I know that based on just listening to people speak Spanish. I coach at base and CrossFit in Midland. So as a coach, we have a lot of Spanish speaking members, and to reduce the language barrier, I communicate with them in Spanish. So I want to maintain that fluency. I want to improve my vocabulary, but also maintain the fluency so I can communicate with people much better. So reading a book a month, monetizing the channel. There's a lot.
There's a lot. Yeah, so
There's
you
a
got married at a pump jack.
Yes.
Wow. What made you want to do that? Like how'd that come about?
It was his idea.
Oh, what's
My husband said the industry brought us together, and because the industry brought us together, why don't we just get married at a lease? I gave him a very crazy look, and I told him there is no way anyone is going to let us get married at a well site. 2 weeks later, I took a chance and emailed the sole proprietor of the company that of one of the companies that I was working for. Emailed me back a week later saying, "Yes, you go get married at this particular pump jack." The funny story is they started talking about the history of the well, of like how many sacks of semen it was pumped with, how long it took to drill it, what it was completed with. It was so funny that we learned the history of the well that we chose to get married on. and the the company really cleaned up the location and even repainted the valves and everything. It was an old pump jack. The other funny thing is that pump jack was also running when we got married. Got to keep production going.
You can never stop
You
production.
can never
You
stop
can't just no that downtime that
that
you
downtime that I talk about. You can never stop. Yeah, you can never stop production. Even there's a wedding going on.
Yeah, even when a wedding's happening. So you're the queen of self-promotion, got married at Pumpjack. You're like the proest oil and gas. And then you told me earlier you were when you were a kid you were saying running around saying yeehaw.
Yeah,
Yeah, so like you've
pro
you're
Texas.
you're
Yeah,
pretty pro Texas. I mean, I don't you're it, huh?
yeah.
You're it. What's the future look like? What do you think? What's your prediction for oil and gas? How are we gonna do this year?
That's a very broad question.
Yeah, broad. Yeah.
Very broad question. I know a couple podcast episodes ago when you had Dakota on,
Mhm.
he made the confession that under a Democratic presidency, he made more money than in a Republican presidency. Now, I'm not going to talk about politics here, but I do think the future of oil and gas is bright. I do think that with the current direction of the oil and gas industry, when I say current direction of the oil and gas industry, I'm talking about how people are sharing more, having more crucial conversations about technical things, the crucial conversations about what's the future of production and value going to be like, the different technologies that we're going to invest in, such as CO2 sequestration or CCS and CCUS, you hear a lot about. I mean, people are taking that pretty seriously. So I do think the industry is bright. I think you're going to need more petroleum engineers to have have those innovative solutions that are going to need to be creative. So when I say the industry is bright, I'm talking about yes, you're going to need work that needs to be done in the industry. But at when I say work that needs to be done, I'm talking about like, you need to have people in the field, you need to have your engineers in the office, but you're not going to be doing the same thing over and over again whenever you have another part of inventory that you're still going to be producing from. You're exploring a new bench, you're exploring a new area from some acreage that you've acquired. So you're always going to need your petroleum engineers. There's always going to be jobs out there. And regardless of the administration, you're always going to need your petroleum engineers.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there's always work to be done. I think all the time. There's always work.
Yeah, doesn't
What
stop.
it never stops. What's personally, what do you want for your career?
What do I want for my
Yeah,
career?
like in the future for yourself.
That's There's a meme
Hmm.
out there that talks about an interview question. And the interview question was, where do you see yourself in 5 years?
Yeah.
And the answer was, well, I didn't even think I'd get this far. If you asked me as a 22-year-old what I wanted to be, would have said that I want to work for the company that I got hired on right out of school, work my way up and be the CEO of that company. And as I've progressed in my career, going through two layoffs, a couple job changes at of my own, and then coming to my current company, I've really started liking the technical side a lot more. I really start liking the educational side about more. I don't want to pursue academia right now. I want to pursue academia when I'm retired and I need something better to do. I'm kidding. I think academia has a lot going on, but I will say that for myself, I would like I want to be known for being a technical person. I want to be known for being a technical expert. I want to be known as a subject matter expert, not on something specific. I'm still trying to find my way of what is the specific topic that you're looking for. I think I'm going to be more of a generalist in terms of a technical expert. so far. I think reservoir production engineering. I'm still trying to figure that out. But really, I didn't see myself getting there 10 years from, I mean, being here 10 years from when I graduated from university. Had no idea that I'd be in Midland again and been in Midland for 7 years now. So I would say that I want to be known for my technical chops,
Okay.
wherever that lands for
Wherever that,
me.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so you've done reservoir and you've done production. You gonna try drilling or completions?
That is funny that you mentioned that because my husband is now like starting his role as a drilling engineer. So when we met, he said, I'm an ops guy and you're a development reservoir engineer person. When are we going to start our own company? He's jokingly said that. When are we going to start our own company? So I think the opposites attracted to us that way. But as far as drilling and completions go, it's not something that I want to do right now, but I'm open to doing it if the opportunity presents itself. You can never say never in this industry.
I totally agree. I can tell you that it wasn't the opportunity to have a rental company presented itself from supply and demand, and I took it, and then it's grown. And I didn't necessarily aim for that. I was aiming for something, but it came to me, and I took it, and it's been great. So I totally get what you're saying. Is like when the opportunity comes and it sounds and it feels right, then you just take it. Uh, that's amazing. I like that. I like but for me, like personally, that's where you said is like I like to try to experience a little bit of everything, and I think that's in my life. It's like, yeah, what is that like? What is that one like? What is that like? And then you'll get like a total you'll get a total kind of experience of what every little sector in the oil and gas is like. And so I always like that idea.
I agree with you. I think what I've learned in this industry is that it's very much a choose your own adventure and you choose your own options, and if you go for this, you go for this company, you'll end up here. If you go for this company, you end up here. And I think what I've experienced for myself was definitely a choose your own adventure. If you choose this company, this is what the outcome of, or this is what the outlook of that company is going to look like for a couple of years, and this is how it's going to look for you. But it's what made everything exciting. It's what helped me develop grit for sure, and resilience, and like how people say it's a getting a thick skin for sure.
Mm. Have you wrote any of the you called it the technical papers, you read them. Have you wrote any yourself?
I've written so far. I've written about I've authored and co-authored 15 or 16 papers.
16 papers.
Mhm.
That's amazing. What's the last one? Tell us about the last one.
The last one was an
Or
Urtech.
maybe I will mainly interrupt you. What about your favorite one?
My favorite one.
Yeah, your favorite one.
I think it's going to be the first one that I ever wrote.
Okay.
It has very. It's not. I look back at it and I realize how much I've grown and how much I know more than I did back then. But I would say it's the first paper that I wrote that I published, and it was that student paper contest paper.
It's okay. You learn. I love that you've put yourself out there. You can put a technical paper out there, and then 10 years later it could be totally, not actually not relevant or whatever, but like, you tried. I'll give it, that's I you said it was the first one you wrote. Do you feel like it was like not good in some way?
That's a great question. I think that it was good. It was good enough to help me win a contest, and I was able to effectively communicate everything. But as I look back at it now, I thought to myself, was it the right decision? Was it the economic decision? And I did follow up with the company that I first got hired up on, and the mentor that I had, and they actually took a couple of those recommendations from. So that felt good to know
Okay.
that it wasn't all a college kid that did not know what she was doing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's super cool. That's super cool. So what was it about? Yeah, what was it about? Get technical with me.
I will get technical with you. It was a recompletion. It's conventional reservoirs. It was in the Wind River Basin of Wyoming, and it is a.
Have you been there?
I have.
Oh, yeah.
It's beautiful.
Is it?
It's so
I've never been. I want
beautiful.
to go.
And it was a recompletion project. So the current formation that the well was drilling from, or the stack of formations that the well was drilling from or producing from, wasn't was not economic. So how do we recomplete those wells, or what are the next formations that we should be producing from? So I ran economics, or I did the decline curve analysis. I communicated with my geologist in identifying areas of potential other recompletion well candidates. But for the particular well that I was looking at, I talked to my geologist on what are some other hydrocarbon bearing zones, did the decline curve analysis, calculated the EURs, or estimate ultimate recoveries, ran the economics, and proposed the next recompletion candidate for the company. And then where else other wells can be other wells that are around the area, they ought to be recompleted too as well. So it was a project that added value to the company because they took those recommendations and they thought it was a good decision.
That's super cool. That's super cool. I had a really great conversation with you. I love watching and following you trailblazing for women in the oil and gas industry. It's super cool. I'm glad I met you and had a great conversation. We'll keep in touch.
Thank you for having me.